Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. We're coming to you from the new Lair, and we're going to talk about the GMT Games monthly update, which was just released. I should have been a little more on top of this, but there's a couple things in here that I want to talk about. Now, I will direct you to the GMT Games website because you all know where that's at, I'm pretty sure, to read the whole thing. I'm not going to go through every little tiny point in here. There's a lot in these things. I'm going to talk about the new games news and some other stuff. The big news, of course, is the fall sale, which will begin at 12:01 Pacific time on Monday, October 28th. This is your chance to get a quite nice amount of stuff for 50% discount. Essentially, everything they have is eligible for the sale. Except stuff that isn't made by GMT and stuff that is in the very last batch of things that got released and are actually still in shipment. Basically, everything else is at least 25%. If you've ordered anything from them through P500, then you get 50% off on each thing. So I think that means that I'm eligible for either 4 or 5 50% discounts. I went kind of bananas with 3 different orders last year and have no intention of doing that again this year. I need to control spending because stuff is coming up that money needs to go to. So I think I have decided that I'm going to spend about $100. And I have not yet decided whether that is going to be coin stuff or other stuff. The specific things I've been looking at were Red Storm, which should qualify for the sale. And I can always buy more coin games. There's enough of them that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in all of them. I have no interest, for example, in Andean Abyss. I know it's the first coin game, very important, influential game. I'm just not interested in the subject, so I don't intend to buy that. I'm a little bit interested in the subject of Cuba Libre, which is, I think, the second coin game. For a couple reasons. One, the topic is actually fairly interesting. I don't know much about it, but also it's said to be the simplest of the coin games. That said, I might go instead for Falling Sky, which is a topic that I am definitely interested in since it's Romans in Gaul. But we'll see what happens. We got a few days here to make a decision. Again, that runs for 6 days, from Monday, October 28th to Saturday, November 2nd. So that is basically next week. The stuff that is shipping right now includes the 4 CMBG, 4th Canadian Mobile Brigade Group, something like that. That's part of the Panzer and MBT family, and as such, that's not a series that I've gotten into, but those who are into that series, and it seems to be fairly popular, I think will have a lot of fun with that. Stalingrad 42, which I am on the hook for, that ought to be showing up anytime. There'll be an unboxing video when it does, and 2 Twilight Struggle things. I actually need the Turn 0 in the promo cards. A little surprised I didn't order it. So moving off, conveniently they actually tell you what are their most expensive games. And this is actually one of the triggers for me wanting to make this video. One of the things that you can get at 50% off or 25% off would still be a substantial discount is Frank Chadwick's Thunder in the East, the recent acquisition by GMT from Victory Point Games. This is a game that I haven't played, but I picked it up on the very day that the sale or transfer to GMT was announced, ironically enough. And it looks really good. I've seen people playing it. They love it. So if you are on the wall on Thunder in the East, then now's the time to get it for $75 instead of $150. I would also recommend, if you are at all interested in the Great Battles of History series, and if you're not, you should be, the SPQR Deluxe Edition second printing, that's $105 retail, which means it would be $52.50 on the sale. I already have all this stuff, so I'm not going to order another one. But that is a bulging package loaded with content, well worth your time to look at. And it's a pretty good first entry into the series as well. So moving right along, the Constant Press games, or some of the Constant Press games are coming. New P500 editions. There are 3 this month. The first is Conquest and Consequence, which is, let's say, not a catchy title, but it is the Pacific iteration of the Triumph and Tragedy series. If you haven't played Triumph and Tragedy, it's very good. I liked it a lot, but I don't own it, and therefore I'm not going to order Conquest and Consequence either, although I will be delighted to play it at some point. Space Corp Ventures is an expansion touted as the first expansion for this John Butterfield Space Corp game. That game, I haven't played it yet, but I pre-ordered the expansion dutifully. And the Weimar Republic. Now, this is a pretty interesting looking game. There's not a lot on it. There's no real images on the webpage. Let's take a quick look at it here. I'd like to briefly commemorate, by the way, the news just broke today, the passing of Francis Tresham. He was the designer not only of the original Civilization, not that Sid Meier nonsense, and the first 18XX game. Very important game designer, and has just passed. So RIP to Francis Tresham. Weimar Republic, we don't really have, we've got a BGG page, and we have a Concept World page, and we've got some map images, which obviously look real early. This is a very interesting subject that I think you could definitely get a good game about. This is designed by Gunnar Holmbeck. I think I'm reading that correctly. I can't really make out whether that's an A or an U. But not familiar with this designer, so I don't have anything to say about that, but it's definitely an interesting topic. Didn't pre-order this yet. I might. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. Weimar Republic on BGG doesn't really have much else. There's spaces, there's a map, there's blocks. Don't really get a mechanical sense of it from here. So check that out on BGG if you're interested in the subject. Like I said, it is an interesting subject. So we've talked about that. New P500s on the horizon. Now, Grant and Alexander from the Player's Aid always have fun trying to guess what these things are. So I'm going to give you one guess, and one guess that's not a guess. Another Enemy Coast Ahead design from Jerry White. I predict that this will be a game in the Enemy Coast Ahead series. Shocking, I know. I'm going out on a limb with that. That is an insta order for me, I have to tell you. I don't know what the subject is. I will immediately buy it. The second item on the list here is Jeff Horger's latest design, a World War II theme. Now, I happen to have seen this game with Jeff playtesting it because he lives here in Columbus, Ohio. So I know what it is. I haven't played it. I know what it is. It looks very interesting. I will be very curious to see what the much more advanced design stuff looks like when GMT does announce it. And I suspect that, one guess I will give you is a non-guess too, which is our second cooperative game. I'm not sure what the first cooperative game was, so I will let the other guys haggle over these other two. So, digital games stuff's coming. Labyrinth is on the way. I'm very excited about that. There's some more articles on Frank Chadwick's Thunder in the East and or ETO series. There's a whole bunch of videos. And again, shipping stuff, so I'll briefly go through this. For CMBG, Stalingrad 42, which I'm pretty excited about, actually. It's basically, different system, obviously. It's basically Case Blue. Not Enemy at the Gates, but maybe Enemy at the Gates, too. Yeah, pretty much Enemy at the Gates. It's basically the same scope as Case Blue, with a significantly larger hex size, on a significantly smaller footprint, and with far fewer counters. I find that very appealing, since I like OCS a lot, and yet I feel like Case Blue is probably more trouble than it's actually worth if you try to play the whole thing together. Because it's just so big. So GMT's kind of killing me here, because I got 2 copies of Stalingrad 42. One is admittedly for a friend coming. And starting to ship on November 12th, we have Cataphract second printing, which is part of the Great Battles of History series, so you know I've ordered that, and Nevsky from designer Volko Runke. I'm on the hook for both of those, so GMT will be getting an unhealthy amount of my money very soon. Also, on the next horizon, there is a bunch of Combat Commander stuff, but we also have Next War Korea and Next War Supplement number 2, which I have also ordered. I will let you go through all of this stuff. I do notice some stuff that was relatively recently announced on P500 is already on this list of nearing art department readiness. China's War is one of them. That is another coin game on the Chinese Civil War. That is a subject of intense interest to me, and it's frankly not a subject that has been gamed extensively. There are a few games on this subject, but not very many. And very few that cover the whole thing. There's some 3-inch boxes coming, too, that I got on order. We got some conventions here. So here is a list of online content creators who review and support our games. Thank you. Oh, gee, guess who's not on here? Even though like 80% of my channel is GMT stuff. Thanks, GMT. But let's not whine about that. Here's some Space Corp Venture stuff, some Imperial Struggle stuff. I don't know what the delay on Imperial Struggle has been. It looks interesting, and the map is very attractive. Here's another coin game. Down to the bottom. So this is the P500 reprint tracking. Now these go by somewhat different rules than a new game just hitting P500 for the very first time would follow. So they don't necessarily feel compelled to demand that there be exactly at least 500 orders, for example. The recent reprint of A World at War was one example. It had maybe 150 pre-orders at the time, I thought. And they were just confident enough in it that they just reprinted it. And they've done that with various other things, too. There is a third printing of Triumph and Tragedy on here, which is about halfway, nearing art department readiness. There's a third printing of Churchill, which there's some video on my channel about that. Next War Korea, all this stuff at the top. Very interesting here, though. Barbarossa Army Group North, Army Group Center, Army Group South. These have all been out of print for quite a while and go for quite high prices on the secondary market. So I would encourage you to snap them up at the P500 price. They are fairly large games. The counter density is not as high as you might think, but the map size is very large. So, and it's an interesting game system that I've been interested in. I'd like to try it. I don't own any of them anymore, to my mild regret, but since they're not on the schedule of things to be played, it's not really much of a big deal. I would like specifically, however, to point out to you one specific item on the P500 reprint list, which I feel is not getting remotely the attention that it deserves. There's a bunch of good stuff on here, but I will particularly point you at Roads to Leningrad 2nd edition. Now, you'll notice that this is now called a 2nd edition and not a second printing because there will be some revisions to it. This thing has been crawling on the reprint counter for a long time now. I will put a link in the notes to this video to Jeremy Antley's series of videos on Roads to Leningrad. And I think if you watch that series, you will agree that this is a very good design, rich in tactical options. I think this is worth a look for any serious wargamer, particularly if you are interested in operational games. These are operational games. This is not part of the Barbarossa Army Group Center, so on and so forth series. It is, however, the same designer. And I don't think the games are all that similar, other than being by Vance von Voorhis and being East Front games. The battles are good. There were 4 scenarios in the box. There's generally, there's 2 maps. There's one map front and back, so one back printed map. And each map has 2 scenarios. And generally speaking, there's a shorter scenario and a longer scenario. And the shorter scenario can absolutely be played in one sitting. The longer scenarios take somewhat longer, but we're not talking about months or anything. So these are, this and its companion game, Roads to Moscow. I have them both. I've played them both. They are terrific. And you should definitely, if you're interested at all in this subject, and it's World War II East Front, everybody's supposed to be, you should definitely be getting in on this. Specifically for $40 for a value-packed game like this, it's totally worth your time. So check this out, Roads to Leningrad 2nd printing. Back to the update very briefly. I don't really have anything else here to add, except to note with approval that there's an Enemy Coast Ahead Dambuster Raid 2nd printing on the list here. That's a pretty cool game. I would encourage you to check out that series as well. Those are solitaire games. The first game is the Dambuster Raid, and the second game is the Doolittle Raid. And I suspect, based on absolutely no information whatsoever, that the third game in the series is going to be the raid on the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. And therefore, the campaign mega game that sort of sits behind the air mission, as it does in the other 2 games, will actually be the Manhattan Project. And if that's the case, I honestly, unless they come up with something completely out of left field, I will totally pre-order this anyway. I could think of a number of alternate subjects, but that's the obvious one that comes to mind. So keep your eyes open for that. Hopefully we'll see that pretty soon. One other thing that I would like to add, and this is not a secret because somebody from GMT or associated in some way with GMT was talking about this on Consim World, regarding the Great Battles of History series. The next title, probably the next title to hit P500 for reprint will be the reprint of the one I just got, The Great Battles of Julius Caesar, The Civil Wars. It will contain all of the Caesar expansions, of which there are at least 2, and there might even be 3. It will also contain the complete contents of Caesar Conquest of Gaul. I don't know whether it will contain the expansion material for that or not, but it is almost certain to be in a 3-inch box. It's going to be up to the modern standards of the core games in the Great Campaigns or Great Battles of History series. Yeah, I got it already. I'm going to buy it anyway. So whenever that hits, as soon as GMT would like to put that on P500, they can have my commitment to take my money for it. So that's all I have to say about the GMT update for this month. If I see another update from what I consider kind of a wargame publisher that's central to my interest, I will definitely do another video if, hypothetically, my Multi-Man Publishing, for example, were to do a press release. I would say Compass Games too, but John Krantz has that covered. I don't need to back him up on that. He's doing it himself. So stay tuned. We got more videos coming. I got a couple of interesting things in the pipeline, a couple of long-term projects that I am hoping to finally get into a state of readiness to get released to the channel. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.